most of you, as the year draws to an end, start to look forward to what I want to read most in 2024. So last year when I did this video, my TBR 2023 video, I talked about 4 new authors I wanted to read for the first time. I talked about 4 book series that I at least wanted to start in the new year, and then 4 standalone novels that were going to be priorities for me in the new year. And I was pretty successful. I was actually 11 out of 12 from that list. So I want to do another top 12, but this is a little different because as I was starting to think about what I want to read most next year, it's a lot of book series. Now, I'm not going to finish all of these book series next year. That would be silly. It would be just kind of daunting to read through all of these in one calendar year. So I'm breaking it down once again into some groups of 4. The first 4 book series that I'm going to talk about are 4 book series that I've already started. And these are just book series that I want to continue, but they won't be necessarily a priority to finish. The second grouping of 4 is going to be 4 book series that I want to start and finish in their entirety. These are kind of like the 4 core series that I'm most interested in reading next year. And the last 4 are 4 book series that I simply want to start. These are some book series of either some really big chunky books or some long series that I want to start, but I don't want to commit to reading the entire thing in 2024. So let's go ahead and get started with the 4 book series that I'm already reading and I want to continue next year. The 4th one may surprise some of you. So the first one is the Elric novels by Michael Moorcock. The Elric Saga, I have the 3 omnibus editions. There are 11 books in this series. This is classic fantasy. I read 7 of these last year, so I may indeed finish this series this year. But it's not going to be a huge priority. I kind of treat these Elric novels as palate cleansers that I read in between other things because most of them do stand alone as kind of standalone novels. But I do like this kind of different kind of classic fantasy with this anti-hero, and I seem to like the character Elric more and more the deeper I get into this series. So I definitely want to continue the Elric Saga next year. So the second series I want to continue is very much like the first series in that these are more standalones than a series, and these are the Conan novels by Robert Jordan. I read 2 of the 6 that I have. Jordan wrote 7 of them before he tackled the Wheel of Time. And these are great palate cleansers. These are fast-paced, sword and sorcery, swashbuckling fare. I read 2 last year. I have 4 more to go in these omnibus collections. Again, we'll see. I may read all of them. I may not, but I at least want to continue reading these because these are fun reads. The third book series that I want to continue next year is The History of Middle-earth by J.R.R. Tolkien and Christopher Tolkien. Now, I had a lofty ambition of reading one of these per month last year and knocking out all 12 volumes. Well, that got derailed early, and I only finished 2 of them last year. So I think of this big, huge box set that I have, I want to at least finish the first volume this year, which is the first 5 volumes. So I think reading the next 3 is probably doable, at least for me in 2024, based on everything else I have planned. These are very historical in nature, very much like the Silmarillion and the Unfinished Tales. Although the first 2 volumes kind of lacked some of the gems that those collections had. But I do want to continue my journey into the backstories of all of the Middle-earth tales by J.R.R. Tolkien. The 4th series may be a surprise to some of you, but I want to continue the Malazan Book of the Fallen next year. Now, if you're somewhat new to the channel, the reason this may be a surprise to old-time watchers is the fact that I had a very public breakup with this series back in May, and I DNF'd the 3rd book, Memories of Ice, and dropped out of a read-along that I was part of and didn't know if I'd ever be back. Well, I want to come back, and there's 2 big reasons why I want to do so. Number 1 is I think about the first 2 books quite a bit, especially Dead House Gates. I think about that book a lot, and I think about just wondering what happens next for the characters that are still alive at the end of that book, but also what's going on in that continent. I really want to find out. So that's number 1. The second reason is if you go back and watch that vlog that I shot for that, especially the last half where I start to get a bit salty and a bit disillusioned with the book, I was trying to read this book during one of the busiest times of the year for me. I was getting home from rehearsals at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night and trying to knock out a chapter or 2 of Malazan, and I just didn't have the mental bandwidth to be able to do that. So, of course, it was a struggle. This is a notoriously challenging series to read, and it just got the better of me. So I want to give it one more shot. I'll likely read this in the summer, which most people do breezy summer reads. For me, that's when I often tackle more challenging things because I have 7 weeks off in the summer. So I'll probably tackle this in the summer, and I like the fact that two things. I won't be part of a read-along, of course. I left the read-along, and then the read-along kind of blew up a couple months after. But so I won't be forced to a schedule with this series. Additionally, I'm not going to read it with like the PowerPoint and trying to keep track of every little thing. I'm just going to read the books. And I think part of it will be easier because I won't be worrying about looking intelligent on those wrap-up videos that we had about each of the books, which is one of the reasons the read-along itself kind of disintegrated. But anyway, I do want to pick up at least Memories of Ice. I think on my B-roll I'll show the next two books that I'll read, even though I do own all of them. This may be an 8-year process for me to finish the series. Who knows? Maybe I'll DNF again. Who knows? But I do want to try Memories of Ice again next year. All right, on to the 4-book series that I want to read in their entirety this year. The first is The 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee. I've had these on the shelf for quite some time. These are chunky books. This is part of a buddy read. There's a bunch of us, so I'm not going to name anybody because I don't want to leave anybody out. But we will be having discussions on my channel after we read each book. We're going to start in January with The Forgetting Moon. We're going to read The Blackest Heart in February and The Lonesome Crown in March. So if any of you want to join us, you can read those books. We'll have the discussions either at the very end of the month that we're reading them or the beginning of the next month. But I am looking forward to reading these because it seems like just about everybody that's read this series just raves about it. But it seems like not enough people have read it. So we're going to try to remedy that, myself and a bunch of other booktubers. But looking forward to starting the year. It's going to be my first book of the year, The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee. Second book series is one I'll actually start in January as well, and this is the Joe Coughlin trilogy by Dennis Lehane. Dennis Lehane is a favorite of mine in the crime fiction world. He's probably my number 2 behind Michael Connelly. And while I don't feel he's as consistently great as Connelly, I think sometimes he can actually reach greater heights when he really, really just nails a book. Joe Coughlin trilogy is just 3 of the last 4 books of Connelly's works that I haven't read. And this is crime fiction, but it's also historical fiction. It's set in Boston around World War I. Thing I know with Lehane, it's usually very, very well plotted, very, very fast-paced. And I like how his books are a bit grittier than Connelly's. And I look forward to reading this trilogy starting in January. So I mentioned at the outset I was 11 for 12 last year. Well, the one failure is I did not get to one of my authors that I wanted to try for the first time last year, and that was Mark Lawrence. So one of my priority book series this year is going to be the Broken Empire trilogy by Mark Lawrence. Now, I'm honestly unsure whether this is an author for me because people that I trust their recommendations, that know my taste, think I'll love it, and some people think I won't like it. So I'm not really sure. So we'll find out when I read it. But I am looking forward to trying Prince of Thorns this year. I have the first 2 in the anniversary edition. I also have the second trilogy. So if I do read these and I do like this, I might go straight into the Red Queen's War trilogy or put that off. We shall see. I know this is very grimdark fantasy. And the only grimdark I think really that I've read is, I guess Red Rising's part of it, but really The First Law is probably the only grimdark fantasy that I've read. So looking forward to reading Mark Lawrence for the first time in the Broken Empire trilogy. And the last priority series for me this year is the Serpent Wars Saga by Raymond E. Feist. This is the next series that's in the grand Rift Wars cycle. There's 9 or 10 series that are all kind of independent series that all build up to the finale of that big Rift War cycle, which ends with the book Magician's End. Most of you know that I reread the Rift War Saga earlier this year, the first series that kicks off the Rift War cycle. And I also read for the first time the Empire trilogy that Feist co-wrote with Janny Wurts, which I absolutely loved. It was one of the best things that I read in 2023. So I do want to continue this series. I've heard a lot of people say that these books are great, especially the Serpent Wars Saga. It kind of continues on with the story that we picked up after the Empire trilogy. This does mean that I have to reread the Krondor's Sons duology, which is Prince of the Blood and The King's Buccaneer, but I'm happy to do so because I do remember enjoying both of those books. But I am looking forward to reading more Feist and over the next few years making my way through this entire Rift Wars cycle. All right, on to the 4-book series that I just want to start because either they're big chunkers or they're long series or they're both. But let's start with The Baroque Cycle by Neal Stephenson. Now, most of us know Neal Stephenson as a science fiction author, but the Baroque Cycle is a trio of huge, chunky books which are historical fiction. And from what I've heard from some people that I trust, this is some of the best historical fiction you will read. So I'm very interested in starting with Neal Stephenson's Quicksilver this year. Truth be told, as big as these are, that might be the only one that I read this year, but I do want to start this series in 2024. The second book series that I'd like to at least start in 2024 is the Rostival Saga by Michael R. Schultheis. Now, I was going to talk about this, but I figured let's ask the author to give his elevator pitch. So, Michael, tell us about the Rostival Saga.
What's up, everyone? Michael R. Schultheis here, author of the Rostival Saga. Well, if you like sword and sorcery fantasy featuring a daring, morally gray barbarian warrior prince for protagonist, if you like the allure of adventure and battle in a lavishly realized world, loosely based on the very ancient Middle East and South Asia, if you like ancient secrets, arrogant immortals, and scheming demigods, and if you're amenable to a sultry slave girl as the female lead, then The Altar of My Fate, Book 1 of the Rostival Saga, may be just the epic fantasy adventure you've been craving. If that sounds like your kind of thing, then pick up The Altar of My Fate for free on Kindle and other ebook platforms and start the epic fantasy adventure today.
Thank you, Michael, for the little blurb. You did that so much better than if I talked about the series. But I am looking forward to starting the Rostival Saga. There are 5 books so far, and I think Michael said it's going to be a 6-book series. So the end will be out pretty soon, but I am looking forward to at least starting that at some point in 2024. The third book series I'd like to start is not really a book series, but it is the 3-volume Civil War by Shelby Foote. Now, the Civil War, the American Civil War, is my favorite historical era and historical event. And Shelby Foote is someone you may know. If you watch Ken Burns' amazing documentary on the Civil War, Shelby Foote was the college professor from the South that had the very slow delivery and very deep Southern drawl that just had the coolest stories and anecdotes about the Civil War. When I researched him, I saw that he has this 3-volume kind of oral history of the Civil War, and I just knew I had to read it. And then one of you, a viewer, was very nice to send it to me off of my Amazon wish list, so I was excited to pick this up. These are huge. I mean, this is about 3,000 pages over the 3 volumes, so I want to read the first volume in 2024 at some point. And last, but certainly not to be considered least, the book series I'd like to start is the Sun Eater Saga by Christopher Ruocchio. Now, Sun Eater Saga, a lot of you know about this series. It is science fiction / fantasy. It's almost done. The 6th book of the 7-book series is out early next year. But in addition to that, it's a really big book series because you get 7 novels. I think he writes a novella in between each novel, and then there's at least 3 short story collections in there as well. So there's a lot to read. Just about everybody that knows my reading taste says that I'm going to love this series, and I'm excited to get into that because just about everybody that I see talk about this series loves this series. So add those 2 things up, and I think this is going to be a great series for me. Can't commit to the whole thing because all of those books will take some time, but I look forward to starting them at some point in 2024, and we'll see if this is another series that disrupts my top 10 science fiction list. But hey, those are the 12 series that are priorities for me next year. Are any of these priorities for you? Let me know. Maybe we can buddy read them. And what series are you most looking forward to read next year? Put that in the comments section below. I'd love to hear it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.